Welcome to the 5th episode of the IX Studio Modeling series. In this episode, we will be covering basic rigging, animation, weight painting, and some other cool stuff. We will learn the importance of Object Data Properties tab, use some constraint modifiers to fix some rig issues, and solve some common problems that arise during the process. Now, you may ask yourself, what are bones? A bone is a fake 3D object that can control real 3D objects. To add a bone into your scene, what you can do is you can press Shift A, go to the Armature tab, and then add in a single bone. And then to demonstrate what bones do, I'm going to add in a cube, scale it down so you can see the bone, and then I'm going to click on the cube and then the bone and pair it with automatic weight. Now we can click on the bone and it will control the cube. Now you're wondering, how can this be useful? Suppose you have a long page that you want to bend. What you can do is you can create a string of bones like this, and then weight paint the strips of paper in line with the string of bones. Suppose something like this. Add some loop cuts to the cube, and then I'm going to parent it with automatic weights. Now we can rotate the bones, we can move them all around, and the cube will follow. Now when dealing with animation, bones, rigging, and animation, it's one of the more complex tasks that you can do inside of Blender, and it's a series that on its own will require multiple videos. But here I'm going to try to cover an overview right here. Now, when I add a bone to the scene, and I click on it, you'll see that in the Properties menu, new tabs open up in the bottom. You have the Bone Data tab, which is the name of the bone and some other bone collection stuff. You'll have some more bone stuff, and then you have bone constraints. Now, a bone constraint is something like IK, Track 2, Limit Rotation, Distance, Copy Transforms, and a bunch of other things. Now, we're going to look at this rig that I made for this book right here to examine some of the modifiers. So let's examine the rig I made for this bone setup here. So what I can do is I can go into object mode, then go to pose mode, and I'm going to see what I've done. So the bone at the very top is the IK control bone. This is for the page flip, and every subsequent bone underneath it is a bone connected to this chain. Every bone underneath is used for different things. This bone at the top of the chain is the IK chain bone. It follows the disconnected bone at the top. So if I move this around, and I select this here, now right here, it'll allow me to move and position my bones around. Now, this modifier has many things. The chain length on this modifier distinguishes how many bones of movement that bone can affect. Now, if I were to set the chain length to 2, that would mean it would only affect 2 bones from itself, from the top movement bone. If I set it to 1, it will only affect the bone for which it has the IK on. Now let's put it back to 4 so we can get a full page IK movement. let's examine some other things. When I move my page like this, and I'm laying it flat, you'll notice the bones closest to the page of the book have a limit rotations modifier set on them. These bones at the bottom will never rotate more than they're supposed to, because otherwise I would run into an issue where the bones would over-rotate and start clipping the page inside of the book. So what I did is I clicked on these bones, set the property of these bones to have a minimum and a maximum rotation angle. And I also have the same things with this bone as well, so that it'll only ever lay flat. This process of adjusting values and adding modifiers makes it so that the animator's job is much easier. It makes it so that they have to adjust less bones, and it leads to an overall better, more cohesive animation and rig. Now let's talk about copy rotation. In this case, it's supposed to make the page lay flatter by copying the rotation of the top bone, but it doesn't really do a whole lot after I adjusted the IK and the limit rotation. It's pretty self-explanatory. Now let's talk about weight painting. To see the weight on our object, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top left, change it, click on our object, go to the top left, change it from object mode to weight paint mode. And when you're looking in the properties panel and you head down to the object data properties, you'll see a tab called vertex groups. And when I click between them, you'll see that the weight paint of the right side of the book is the right side page flip. If we were to go to the page right here, the red area denotes where the most amount of geo-binding it does. And then as it gets colder and colder and colder, it has less influence. And it does a very similar thing for every bone. Same thing for all this stuff. Learning how to weight paint is very important. It'll be very helpful and useful to you. And what I would do is I would press T and start clicking on the tools and learning how to use each one. The draw tool will allow me to add in weight to the individual bones. The blur tool blurs out your weight and makes it a smoother transition. Smear is like you're smearing it. Gradient does this. Simple weight allows you to pick the weight at what you're drawing, and a bunch of other really cool things. Now, let's kind of move on to more complex work. This right here is a character I did for the June ArtStation Medieval Back and Forth Challenge. This rig may look very complex and hard to set up, but in fact, it is actually a default rig using the Rigify add-on. Right here, I'm going to add the rig in, I'm going to scale it down to my desired height, and then I can move the bones into position. To access this, what you can do is you can go here to the top left, go to the edit preferences section, and then search for the Rigify add-on, and just click it. Now, let's time to talk about things more like a complicated IK rig. So right here, I have the hand bone. Now, suppose I wanted to animate his arm moving out and forward, reaching out like this. Without IK, I would need to animate every single bone, his shoulder bone, his elbow bone, his hand bone, and it's just a lot of work to get that all done. But with a good IK rig, that's all solved for you. With your rigs, depending on how good it is, you can include things like rig controls that allow you to bend the fingers by scaling the controls. Some other really cool stuff. You can also parent things to other things. For this hammer, suppose I wanted to animate him hitting something. I can duplicate the hammer from his belt, parent it to his hand, and then hide it whenever I'm not using it. And it makes it a lot easier to animate him like grabbing things. It's really useful.